Ndonamata kuti munge muinesu apo tichidzidza tigonzwisisawo nyika iyo tinorarama mairi, mativi ese eGreat Controversy, tigoonawo kuti nyika yakapatsanurwa nechii, iri kurwira chii, tigoonawo zvakajeka kuti denga rakarwirwa pamusoro pechii, uye sarudzo idzo vanhu venyu vanofanira kunge vainadzo. Tibetserei tiite sarudzo kwadzo, tisarudze tisingatarisi maemotion kana mafeeling, asi zvichibhesa pachokwadi. Tiite madecisions asina chindini mukati. Muzita raJesu tonamata, amen. Kuna vamwe vari kupatisipeta nhasi, vamwe vari kungoteerera chete. Kuna vanhu vakasangana-sangana vanogona kutaura, kwoita vamwe vasingakwanisi. Ndichaedza kuti zvisazangana, ndinonzwisisa dambudziko rine macircumstance. Ndogara ndichiedza kunanga nyaya, handisi kuedza kuti dhonza. Dambudziko nderekuti pane mapoints ari foundational anofanira kuitwa apo tarichiedza kutaura nezve-left wing. Tiri kubetserekana zvikuru nekutarisa right wing, tichinyatsoiongorora tichida kunzwisisa kuti musiyano we-right wing ne-left wing ndeupi, uye kuti Mwari vane basa here nepolitics dzatinosarudza, uye kuti Mwari akaitirei kuti politics yedu ichinje muna 2018. Saka kunzwisisa zvese izvi tisati tabata ve-left wing, tichatanga tadhiga ve-right wing, tonzwisisa kuti chii chinovamotivheta ve-right vaya. Izvo zvatakati zvinomotivheta ve-right wing kurwira rusununguko pamusoro peequality, pamusoro pazvose. Icho chinozokurudzirawo ve-left kutenda murusununguko, asi vanoprioritiza equality. Kana zviviri izvi, equality nefreedom, zvakakosha kudaro, maprinciples aya kana atungana, tinoti United States iglorious land, iri kusumuka muna 1798, ndiyo mambo okumusoro, asi Babylon haisi glorious land, Middle Persia haisi, Greece haisi zvakare, Rome hayaimbova glorious land, asi United States ndiyo. Nemhaka yei zvakadaro, takati United States glorious land apo Rome isiri, nenyaya yekutenda kuti nyika yavo yakawanikwa pamaprinciples efreedom neequality. Izvo zvinonzi naObama North Star. Havasati vasvika kwariri, asi vanoramba vachishingirira kuti vasvike kwariri. Pavanoshingirira, dai vaisvika pariri, hapaizombova neSunday law kana kuputsika kwechikepe, asi toziva kuti havaiti zvakanaka havo. Mukuzama kunzwisisa kuputsika kwechikepe cheUnited States, tinodzokera kumaprinciples efreedom neequality iwayo. Anhu chii chinoitika paanotungana, nekuti anogara achingotungana. Ve-right wing pavanoona zvichitungana vanochuza freedom, ve-left pavanoona zvichitungana vanochuza equality. Saka pane kutaura ikoko kwekuti ndipei rusununguko kana ndipei zvangu rufu. Ndogona kurambirana nezvaunotaura, asi ndinodhifenda kusvika murufu. Right yako yekuzvitaura. Vanhu vanomobiliza vachitenderedza pafreedom. Takaenda kumaprotest ematruckers vekuCanada mucontext yemamandates eCovid, vachiti vanhu ngatidhifendei freedom. Kwaiva nemarallies akawanda kudaro. zvakafanana neveUnited States, Australia Party vachidaidzira kuti toda freedom. Ndoda kungoisa point yekuti zviri nyore sei kunzwa kutaura sekuti ndinogona kurambirana nezvaunotaura asi ndinodefenda right yako yekuzvitaura. Zvinonzwikwa kunge zvakanaka, asi paunozoongorora kutaura uku, pandakatanga kuzvinzwa ndakafunga kuti izvi zvinenge zvakanaka izvi. Ndikati ndogona kuzvipostawo paFacebookwo yangu. Ndoda kurarama munyika iyoyo inoti ndinodefenda right yako yekutaura zvinhu zvasingatenderani nazvo, asi mushandisirwo wainoita uri toxic. Nzira iyo vanhu vanoglorifya freedom. Tichitaura kana zveHollywood, kusimudzira kwavanoita freedom mumamovies avo akasiyana, pavanenge vachientertaina public, pane paine deep state, pane paine vanhu vari kuda kuuraya vanhu vakawanda, mascenario akafanana naiwayo, kana kuti paine robot iri kuda kutorera vanhu mafreedom, wozowana muhero anenge arimo vanouraya vanhu vakawanda oenda kunyika dziri foreign. Zvese izvi zvichiitwa kunzi vasevhe mafreedoms evanhu. Handitendi kuti izvozvo focus iyi yanga ine Hollywood, handitendi kuti ine chekuita nenzira iyi yanyanya vanhu vechidiki nevemiddle age muUnited States marwire ava vanoita freedom. Tichita saGeorge Soros semuenzaniso padeep state vachitorerwa freedom yavo. Vazhinji vari kuzama kurarama life yeyo muHollywood mamovies aya. Saka tinoona kutaura uku kwakasiyana siyana. Pane kumwe kutaura kwauya mupfungwa mangu pandaifunga pakati pevhiki. Ndinofunga kuti ndiyo mhaka iri pasi pekuti sei nyika yakakanyika zuva ranhasi. Ndichakubvunzai. Kutaura kwokuti vanhu havazomborangariri zvamakataura asi vanorangarira zvamakaita kuti vanzwe. Ngatimbofungai kuti izvi zvakashata sei. Kuti priority haisi pane zvaunotaura kana zvaunoita. Vanhu zvavanorangarira ndezvekuti wakaita kuti vanzwe sei. Dambudziko munguva yaJesu yaiva ipi? MaPharisees vaya vaiva nationalistic vakanzwa sei Jesu paakauya? Meseji yaJesu yakaita kuti vanzwe sei? Havana kurangarira zvaaitaura. Hapana chaakataura chaivakoshera. Chaivakoshera ndechekuti achiita kuti tinzwe sei. Asi dambudziko nderekuti havana kunyatsonzwa zvakanaka. Vanhu vakashaya hanya nezvaaitaura nekuti vanhu vaisateerera. Kana vakateerera zvaaitaura aifanira kutaura zvishoma. Vanhu vanga vasina basa kuti aitaura kuti kudii. Vaiva nebasa neyekuti akataura zvakatiita kuti tinzwe sei. Sei munationalist wekuRussia muRussia today asingatendi mhuri dzake dziri kuUkraine vachivaratidza mafotos ezviri kuitwa neveRussia kuUkraine. Kana munhu wekuRussia anonamata Vladimir Putin kwemakore ese aya akavaka model yake yechinationalistic apo Stalin aiva hero, apo nyika yavo ichipesecuta ivo varivo mavictims, Vladimir Putin ariye hero wavo akasumudzwa kuti vadzosere glory yenyika yavo. kupera kwecold war. Identity yavo sevanhu yakatenderedzwa pane zvese izvi. Wonzwa munhu achiti Vladimir Putin anonyepa. Mamila rights vari kukomita genocide. Nyika yese ichitaura kuti nyika yese haisi kukudai nyanye veUnited States. Sei vasingagamchiri chokwadi ichizvozvo? Inyaya yekuti zvinhu zvakabatana nezvavanotenda haisi news kana information zvainotaura kwavari, asi inyaya yekuti information iyi inovaita kuti vanzwe sei. Izvi kutaura uku kwakashata chaizvo, asi vanhu vanozvinyora zvakanaka pamafacebook pavo. Kana munhu akataura chinhu chinoita kuti mumwe munhu anzwe asiri comfortable, voisa pafacebook, vanhu vachiti hanzi handimborangariri zvaunotaura kana zvaunoita, asi ndezvekuti ukaita kuti ndinzwe sei. Hongu ndezvekuti ukaita kuti munhu anzwe sei, asi ndiyo mhaka iyo vanhu vemupasi tenderere vacharasika. Vanhu vemovement vanozoti inini mumovement ndotarisa kuti ndakanzwa kuti leadership yakandiita kuti ndifile sei, ndakanzwawo ndichidiwa here kana kuti sei, asi ndofunga kuti pasi pazvo pari selfish. Apo tine dambudziko munyika enhasi, sexism nemisogyny zvairi kuita kuvanhukadzi nevanhu veLGBT, kuti kune disease iri kuuraya vanhu vazhinji. Tine vaccine yayo. Ndinohopa kuti hatingosapoti vaccine iroro chete, nekuti vamwe vanhu vakagadzira vaccine iri vakaita kuti tinzwe zvakanaka kana kuti tinzwe takagamuchirika. Tinofana kusvika papoint yekuti seiko ndiri mumovement iyi. Kutaura uku kunoita kunge kwakanaka, asi kunoita kuti ndinzwe ndiri hopeless kutaura chokwadi. Tinogona kutaura kuti vanhu vanogona kusarangarira zvaunotaura, asi vanorangarira zvawakaita kuti vanhu vanogona kutaura kuti vari mumovement muno munoti ndinonzwa zvakanaka ndichibatwa zvakanaka, asi pane nguva iyo vanoita kuti vanhu vasanzwa zvakanaka. Hazvigoni kudziviririka kwandiri. Asi kutaura uku kunotenderedza freedom, kunoselebrata freedom nefreedom of speech. Hongu maprinciples akakosha eglorious land. Eden ndiyo glorious land, ancient Israel nematambudziko ayo ese, United States senyika, uye nyika yagadzirwa patsva. Freedom iprinciple iri fundamental, asi freedom neequality pazvinotungana, zvichitungana nemaissues akaita secivil rights,
through the course of sin,
through
the history particularly of Eve and of Ham, those who have been suppressed by
society.
Christ's parable teaching
kudzidzisa kwaKristu kwemaparables kwakanga kwakagadzirwa kuti vanhu vanzwe zvisiri comfortable. Kana Kristu akagadzirwa kuti vanhu vanzwe zvisiri comfortable, society yese ichibvumirana kuti hatirangariri zvaunotaura, asi tinorangarira zvaunoita kuti tinzwe. Pane mubvunzo here kana kuti surprise kuti nemhaka yei Jesu akaroverwa? Kana vanhu vachifunga kuti kutaura uku kutaura kwakanaka vasinganyatsi kudhiga zvakadzika, zvinoratidza sei tichirepresenta macamp meeting akaterekedzana, toona vanhu vachiisa mastatus updates vachiisa kutaura ukokuku, woona kuti hapana chinhu chandinogona kutaura chinokompita nemameme.
But I just wanted to I did mention that in the context of reviewing the right wing versus the left wing, equality versus freedom, the glorification that is given to freedom.
Glorification inopiwa kufreedom.
we have been targeting the right wing
tanga tiri
since
kutageta
2018.
ve-right wing kubva muna
And we've been doing that from a
2018
prophetic
tanga tiri
perspective.
kuzviita nemuono
And that has made
weprofesi.
people,
Izvi zvakaita
that
kuti
parable
vanhu
teaching has made people feel
parable
not
teaching
right.
iyi yakaita
It
kuti
has
vanhu
made
vanzwe
people
zvisina
feel
kunaka,
uncomfortable.
zvakaita
Not
kuti
just
vanhu
in
vanzwe zvisiri
2019
comfortable,
and
kwete
in
2018
2019,
chete
in
kana 19
2020, in
kana 20
2021,
kana
and you
21
can bet in 2022 it
uye
is continuing to.
2022 zviri
It
kuramba
makes
zvichienderera
people feel
mberi.
uncomfortable.
Zvinoita kuti vanhu vanzwe
People
zviri
need to get past
uncomfortable,
how it makes them
asi
feel
vanhu vanofana
and look
kupfuura
at what is
kutoti
actually being
zvinondiita
presented.
kuti ndinzwe zvisiri izvi,
Freedom versus
votarisa
equality.
izvi
Equality
zvinhu
should win.
zvakanaka.
That was the
Freedom versus
conflict in Eden.
equality
That was the choice
ndiyo
that Adam and Eve
conflict
were
yanga
given.
irimo
They were given the
mueden.
tree because it
Choice
was a mechanism of
vakapuwa
voting between
muti,
two political parties.
vakapuwa
In
kuti
eating the
vasarudze
apple,
pakati
it
pemapolitical
wasn't
party maviri.
this
Mukudya apple
minor moral decision of God
yakanga
said,
isiri
I
kamoral
shouldn't,
decision
but I'm really
kadiki
hungry and I'm kind of
ako kaEve akangoti
curious.
ndane nzara ndiri
It was a
kungoda
system
kungoona
of
kuti apple
voting.
rinodyika
Satan
sei.
presented an alternative type of government. A
Satan
type of government
akapresenta
that would
government iri
prioritize freedom
alternative
over equality. And
yaiprioritiza
how did that
freedom
make
pamusoro
Eve feel?
peequality. Izvi zvakaita kuti Eve
Made her
anzwe
feel
sei,
good.
akanzwa
And she forgot what Christ
zvakanaka
had
chaizvo.
said and only remembered how Christ and the angels who presented God's government to her, remembering
Vozorangarira
how what they
Kristu
had said
nengirozi
made her feel.
dzaipresenta
And she chose
hurumende
the one that
yaMwari
made her feel
kwaari
better. And
kuti vakaita
Adam,
kuti anzwe sei. Iye
however
akachuza
it's
zvakaita kuti
presented,
anzwe zviri
wasn't
nani.
really that
Adam
extremely different.
zvakanga zvisina kunyanya kusiyana experience yakewo.
He saw
Akaona
a system of voting,
system
and he just
yekuvhota,
didn't want to think about it too
akanga
much. He
asingadi
did it
kunyanya
in
kufunga
haste
nezvazvo, akazviita
because
nehasikasi nemhaka
he
yekuti
realized the consequences
akaona
of
maconsequence acho
staying with Christ's government, what he would lose.
ekugara muhurumende
And he liked
yaKristu,
the way
kuti
his current life
ndinorusa
made him
zvinhu
feel.
zvakawanda sei. Akanzwa achifarira zvinhu
So
zvaainzwa
over the last few
mazvazana
years,
ainzwa.
we have been targeting
Makore mashoma
Christianity. We've been
apfuura
targeting
tati
Protestantism
kunangana
specifically,
nechristianity neprotestantism
somewhat
nyanyanyanya,
Catholicism, but
uyewo
we've been speaking to
catholicism.
this,
Tatiri kunyanyobatirira
that
pane izvi
segment of Donald
segment
Trump's
iyo
base.
yebhesi yaDonald Trump.
And I noticed a trend very
Ndakaona
quickly
trend nekukasika
where
apo
people thought, well, all we
vanhu
need to
vaifunga
do
kuti
is
saka takungofanira isusu
criticize Protestantism,
kungotsoropodza
criticize Christianity,
protestantism, tsoropodza
and
christianity,
push away Protestantism and
topushira
Christianity
protestantism
and
nechristianity
embrace
uko
more of the secular world,
tobatirira
and the problem will be
secular
solved.
world.
It
Tobva
was this
tasolva
type of
matambudziko.
unspoken
Ndeuku
but growing
kuitika
belief in the movement
kutenda so
that
kusingataurwi
Christianity was the
kuri kukura
cause
mumovement,
of the problem and
kuti
the whole
christianity
of the
ndiyo
problem.
problem
They
yese
saw
uye ndiyo dambudziko
this,
rese. Vakazviona izvo
which they see, I
izvo
think people have thought is the
zvavanoona.
entirety of Trump's base,
Vanhu
and it isn't.
vakafunga
But
kuti
seeing
ndiyo bhesi
Protestantism,
yaTrump yese,
Christianity,
vakaona
as the
protestantism
cause of the
nechristianity
problem and the
senge
whole of the
ndiyo
problem.
yaikonzeresa dambudziko rose
And
uye ndiyo
in
yaiva
going into the
problem
right wing,
yese.
what I'm trying to
Mukupinda
prove is
muright
that
wing,
it's not the
zvandaiedza
cause
kupruvha
and it's not the whole.
ndezvekuti haisiriyo nyaya yacho
Especially
yose,
saying it's not the cause, but also
haisiriyo
trying to
honzero.
also illustrate that it's. You
Tichidawo
also can't
kuzama
say that it's the
kuratidza
whole of the
kuti
problem.
haisiriyo
And to
dambudziko
do that, we
racho
went to
rose.
the Vox
Kuita
article,
izvozvo
a
takaenda
lot of other
kuarticle
articles as
reVox
well.
nemamwe
But the Vox article,
asi
because
article
I thought
reVox
it gave a window into a very large
rakatipa
segment
muono
of
kune imwe
the
segment
right-wing base
yakakura
that is not
yebhesi
Christian,
yeve-right wing
and it
yanga
spoke
isiri
about the
Christian,
Trinity.
yaitaurawo nezvetrinity.
The right-wing or far-right Trinity
Trinity
in the
yeve-right
United
wing
States. Who can tell me
yefar-right
what the
kuunited
Trinity
States.
was?
Pane angandiudzawo here kuti Trinity iyo yaiva chii?
Marie, do you remember what the Trinity was?
Marie, ucharangarira kuti Trinity yaiva chii?
No, sorry, I can't remember.
Kwete, handicharangariri.
I think it'll come back to you when
Ndofunga kuti
it's
zvichadzoka
said,
kwauri
Catherine.
pazvichataurwa. Catherine,
Libertarianism,
kune
atheism,
libertarianism,
and men's rights
koita atheism,
activism.
koita men's rights
Yes,
activism.
libertarianism. And
Libertarianism.
remember, not the political party.
Quite a
These are
political
not followers
party.
of the political party,
Ava
but
vasi
libertarianism
vateveri
philosophy.
vepolitical party, asi tiri
And
kutaura
how
philosophy
libertarianism philosophy has
yeve-libertarianism
impacted the
uye
Republican Party,
philosophy
which
yavo
we're
kuti
going to discuss
yakaimpacta
more
sei
of.
Republican
Atheism
Party, izvo zvatichazodiscuss.
and men's rights. Thank you,
Koita
Catherine.
atheism, koita namen's rights. Waita zvako, Catherine.
men's rights forums,
maforum
movement, that
ema-men's
entire
rights
base. Does that bring it back to you, Laurie?
Zvinodzosa here ndangariro Marie?
Ring a bell?
Yes, thank you.
Hongu, maita basa.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
So what I wanted to do was actually use the militia groups in the
kushandisa
United States as
mamilitia
an
groups
example.
ekuunited states
Because
semuenzaniso
if we're going to talk
nekuti
about
kana
this,
tichizotaura nezveizvi
prioritizing
avo vanoprioritiza freedom,
then I want to talk about
ndinobva ndada
libertarianism
kuti titaure
as a
nezvelibertarianism
philosophy. Because
seiri
we read the
philosophy.
quote last week of a Republican saying, the
Nekuti
problem with my political
rangarire
party
last week
is
murepublican
libertarianism
akati
philosophy,
dambudziko
and that
rangu nerepublican
libertarianism
party
philosophy
ifilosofi
and greatly
yechilibertarianism.
impacted the
Filosofi
Republican
iyi
Party in the
yakaimpacta
history of the civil
zvakanyanya
rights
republican
movement
party
about 10
munhoroondo
years
yecivil
before
rights movement.
the
10
Libertarian
years
Party as a
libertarian
political
party
party even formed.
sepolitical party isati yatombogadzirwa.
So I wanted to show the
Saka
link
ndaida
between
kuratidza
not
kubatana
republicanism and
kwakaita
not
kwete
Protestantism and
republicanism
far-right
kwete
militias in the United
protestantism
States.
nefar right
I want to show it between libertarianism
militias. Ndaida
and
kuratidza
the militia groups. We've read
kufanana
quotes
kwelibertarianism
said there's
nemamilitia
that
groups
link.
aya. Takaverenga
I read a
maquotes
few quotes that just stated as a fact
aizvitaura
that there is a
semafacts
pipeline between
kuti
libertarianism
pane kubatana
and
kuripo
far-right
kwelibertarianism
leaders of the far-right.
nematungamiriri emafar right.
And I wanted to, the far right is broad, only a very small percentage of them are in militia groups, but it does provide a window. So I wanted to discuss the Proud Boys,
kuti titaure
the Oath
maproud
Keepers,
boys
the
maoath
3%ers,
keepers ma3
and
percenters
the somewhat more ambiguous and leaderless what's that movement called? Starts with a B.
kwozoita imwe movement iya iri
Someone unmuted
ambiguous
shouted
inotanga
out
na
if
B.
you remember. Boogaloo.
Veboogaloo.
Thank you. The Boogaloo movement.
Boogaloo movement.
So kind of want to discuss the four.
Saka ndaida
But we're not
kutaura
going to do
zviri
that
zvina
today
izvi
because I got
asi
sidetracked this
hatikuzozviita
morning.
nhasi. Ndakaendeswa paside peroad vhiki rino.
For people who, because we have a few people who are new on,
kune vanhu
if what you
vanyuwana
can do is if you wish
kana
to ask a
maigona
question
dei kana
or
maida kubvunza
comment,
mubvunzo kana
if you can
kukomenta
put your hand up in
maisimudza
the
ruoko
chat
rwenyu
section.
moisa
So
kusection
if you
yemachats
go
yayo.
to the chat, you'll
Moenda
see
kuchat,
that Catherine just before
munoona
she
kuti
put a
Catherine
H,
anoisa
and that
H.
H just means a hand.
H iyi
So if
inongoreva
you
kuti
put a H in the
ndakasimudza
chat,
ruoko. Mukaisa
I know your
H
hand is
kuchat
raised,
ndoziva kuti ruoko rwenyu
and
rwakasimudzwa.
then I know that you have a comment or a question.
Ndoziva kuti
So
mune
just to
kutaura
explain
kana mubvunzo.
how we're
Saka
some of the
ngotsanangura
operating, the way we
ndingotsanangurawo
operate in
kuti
these classes. We don't just
tinozvifambisa sei
unmute and
mumaclasses
speak
ano. Hatingounmute
because it's
totanga
a little
kutaura
difficult to do that
nekuti
over Zoom.
zvinozogosha
Instead,
kuzviita
people
pazoom.
put a H in the chat.
Vanhu vakaisa
So
H
please feel
kuchat
free to do
toziva kuti
that
vane ruoko.
if you would
Inzwai
like to.
makasununguka kuzviita.
So we were going to do militias and now we're not.
Tatizoita mamilitias aya
Instead
haticamaita.
of discussing libertarianism,
Izvi
I want to discuss atheism.
pachinambo chekutaura libertarianism taakumbotaura veatheism.
With some of these things, it's a class. But it's a little difficult because I have a selection of points I want to make and quotes that
selection
I've kind of collated.
andakaita ndaida kuti
But it is interactive.
asi tinenge tichiinteract.
At any point you feel
Pane
lost,
point ipi zvayo
or you have
mukanzwa
a thought that you
marasika
want to
kana kuti
add,
muine pfungwa
or you
dzamunoda
would just like
kuwedzera
to repeat what
kana
I'm
kuti
saying
muchida
back to me to
kudzokorodzawo
make sure that
zvandataura
you're on the same page,
kuti timeke
please
sure
just
tiri
raise your
papeji
hand.
imwe chete. Munongosumudza ruoko rwenyu.
Otherwise, I might end up reading a fair bit tonight. And I
Otherwise
know some people are just
ndichazoverenga.
listening in anyway.
Ine ndoziva kuti vamwe vari
Because of
kungoteererawo
circumstances.
zvavo
So
nenyaya
we're targeting the
yemacircumstance.
right wing.
Pamune muchitageta
And
maright wing,
there is a large segment of the right wing that
pane
is
segment yeveright
younger.
wing ikuru iri vechidiki.
We see that at Gamergate,
Tinozviona kuGamergate,
but we also see that through Trump's inauguration. We see
tozozvionawo
that through
nekuinaugurotwa
January
kwaTrump.
6th. There is a
Tozviona muna
younger
January
group being
6.
appealed
Pane
to
boka
than,
revechidiki
say,
rinoapila kwavari
Grandpa on his lazy boy watching
vakaita kunge vana sekuru
Tucker Carlson.
vachiona
There
zvavo
is
Tucker
this
Carlson.
rising movement in the
Kune
United States
movement iri kusumuka kunyika yeUnited
that are
States
more reflective of America's
avo
future,
vanonyanyoratidza
secular
future
future,
yeamerica
right-wing
yesecular
secular future,
right-wing
than
secular
of
future yeveamerica
America's Christian past.
kwete
And it's that segment
Christian
that I'm
past
trying to
yeamerica
draw
iyi
out and illustrate.
ndoda kuzama kutara
They are who
arinoenzaniso
I believe we should be most
ndivo avo
concerned about.
vatinofanira kunge
With
tichinyanya
targeted
kuona
Protestantism,
nezvavo
because
kuti
that is
isi
where this
takambotaura
movement comes
protestantism
under. That's
nekuti
where
movement yedu
Adventism
inouya
sits.
pazasi ipapo ndo
But
pakagara
expanding
adventism
out, looking at this
asi tikazoextenda manje
other portion of the
takutarisawo
right wing today,
mamwe portion eright wing nhasi aya
we saw what is
takaona
described as the Trinity.
izvo zvaidescribwa
Men's
setrinity
rights, libertarianism, but
men's
atheism.
rights
So I
libertarianism
want to talk
uye
about atheism
atheism
because if we are in a
ndoda kutaura nezveatheism
post-Christian world,
nekuti kana
which we have
tamupost
agreed that
christian
we are in,
world iyo
if
yatakatenderana
the
kuti
United
ndeyatari
States is
kana
also
veamerica vari
post-Christian,
zvakare post christian
then you would think that if
unobva
Christianity
wafunga
was
iwe
the
kuti
cause and the
kana
whole of the
christianity
problem,
iriyo
that
yaikonzeresa kana
everything
kuti
would
ndiyo
be
yaiva
up.
dambudziko racho rese
But I want to suggest why that's not the case.
ndoda kusagesta kuti sei zvisiri
To a large
zvakaitika
degree,
saizvozvo
because of this atheism. And I know
inyaya
some of
yekuti
you have
nyanyanya
actually
nyaya
sent me
yeatheism
things
iyi ndosati kuna
where
vakanditumidzira
atheism
zvinhu
has
zvakaita
been
kunge atheism
discussed.
apo
So some of
yaitaurwa
you might
nezvayo
have
vamwe venyu
some background
munogona kunge muine
into
background
what is called new atheism.
kune inonzi new atheism.
New atheism became a term was coined in 2006
new atheism izwi
to
rakataurwa
describe
muna
the
2006
positions
richitaura
or the
maposition
position held by many
akanga
prominent
akabatwa
atheists in the
nemaatheist
21st
vaizivikanwa
century.
chaizvo
So
mu21st
there's
century
atheism of
saka
the 19th
atheism
century, of the 20th century,
ye19th
but
century
now
iriko
getting into the
neye20th
21st
century
century,
iriko zvinezvi
they saw
tapinda
changes
mu21st
within
century vakaona
atheism as
atheism
a
iyi
collective, as a
yakuchinja
movement.
yakuita
And with
semovement
that change in
nekuchinja uku
the 21st century,
mu21st
in
century
2006,
na
the term
2006
was coined a new
vakabva
atheism.
vapa zita rekuti new
And this
atheism.
new atheism
New
is much
atheism
more, they don't like this word, but they're described as fundamentalists.
inotaurwa
The
sekuti
atheism of the
mafundamentalist. Atheism
20th century,
ye20th
of
century
the 1900s,
yekuma
it was kind
1900s
of like you were this
yakanga
person and you were
yakaita
also an
sekunge
atheist,
uri
and
munhu
you just
uyu
didn't
uri
get involved
muatheist
in religion.
zvakare
New atheism
unongoinvolvawo
believes
haungoinvolve main religion.
there
Atheism
shouldn't be a
yezvinezvi
toleration of
inoti
religion. Instead,
hatitofani kutolerata
religion
religion.
and how they connect it to
Vanototi
superstition and irrationalism
religion
should be
inobatana
countered,
nesuperstition
criticized, and
neirrationalism
challenged
inofana
by rational arguments,
kucriticizwa
especially
nekuchallenjwa
when
nerational
religion
argument.
exerts undue influence in
Nyanye
government.
religion kana
So new
yakuita influence
atheists are
mugovernment.
much more
Saka
activists than
maatheists
those of
manyuwani aya vanonyanya kunge
the
vari
last century and the
maactivists
century before. This
kupfuura
is
vemacentury
atheistic
apfuura.
leaders who particularly
vatungamiriri
coalesced
vemaatheist
post-2001.
vakasangana
And what
after
they're fighting
2001
is
year
religion's influence on the government, which
vari
for an
kurwisa
Adventist we should
influence
agree with.
yereligion
Would be deeply opposed to church and state. But remember, I said libertarianism is opposed to church and state
semusabata
as
unogona
well.
kufunga kuti vanenge maatheist havari right nokuti vari kuoposa church and state, asi takati libertarianism iri kuoposawo zvakare church and state.
Then we need to consider how we describe the union of church and state.
Tinofana kuconsider kuti tinotarisa sei mubatanidzwa wechurch and state mudispensation redu. Kana zvinhu zvichikonfisa kana kutambudza ndizivisei. Atheism itsva.
It's coined as a term in 2006.
Yakadedzwa sezita muna 2006.
But it's about a group of particularly 4 men.
There's 4 of them
that kind of led the way.
Vakatungamirira nzira.
Really did lead the way into new atheism. And new atheism was a reaction to September 11.
Kune zvakaitika September 11.
In 2004, a book was published called The End of Faith, Religion, Terror, and the Future of Reason.
religion,
So this was a
terror,
very
uye future
influential
religion.
book
Yakanga riri bhuku rakanga riri influential
attacking
zvakadaro
religion
raiataka
and
religion
saying that we need the
vachiti ivo
future of reason, the end of faith.
todawo kupedza zvezvekutenda izvi.
And this book was written by
Bhuku
a
iri
man
rakanyorwa nemurume
named Sam
ainzi
Harris.
Sam Harris.
Does anyone know who Sam Harris is? If you do,
Pana anoziva here
put your
Sam
hand up in
Harris
the
uyu?
chat. I
Sumudzai
won't
ruoko
go to you
muchat. Ndogona kuuya
to
kwamuri
speak, but if you know
kuti
who he is,
mutaure. Kana
just
muchiziva
put your
kuti
hand in the
ndiani,
chat.
chingosumudzai
Curious
ruoko
to know if people have heard of him.
muchat. Ndiani akambomunzwa?
One of those names where
Ndiro rimwe zita iro apo
it's kind of blends in.
risinganyanyi kuzika rinongoblendawo in.
This became this book, The End of Faith, Religion, Terror,
Bhuku
and the
iri
Future of Reason,
rataurwa
became a bestseller in the United States. And
rakatengeswa
then over the
zvikuru
next couple of years,
United
a few
States.
more books came out by atheistic
Kunozoita
authors.
mamwe mabhuku akatevera ainyorwawo nemaatheist.
And in this book, Sam Harris is very
Mubhuku raSam
highly
Harris
critical
anenge
of
achikritisaiza zvikuru
Islam, especially,
nyaya
hence
dzeislam
or
nyanye-nyanye
the part in it speaking of terror, but also
vachitaura
Christianity and
zvetera
Judaism.
uye
He was asked
Christianity
in an interview
neJudaism. Aibvunzwa
about the writing of his book.
muinterview
They said, what got you to
nezvekunyorwa
write that book
kwebhuku
in the
rake
first place?
kuti
He said
wakasvika
9/11.
pakuinyora
They
zvadii,
say 9/11. He
vakati
said, I was
9/11.
writing it
Zvikanzi
on 9/12,
ndairinyora
September 12, I was
ndakatotanga
writing
kurinyora
this book.
musi
It was my
waSeptember
instantaneous
12.
reaction.
Ndo
So I want
reaction
us to
yangu
see that what's coming
yakatoitika
up here,
iyoyo.
this new
Ndoda
atheism,
kuratidza kuti
is a
new
direct
atheism
response
iyi
to September 11.
yakasumuka iyi yaiva response iri direct
Because
kune
what they
zvakaitika
believe,
September 11 nekuti zvavaitenda
writing it the Australian way, what they believe
zvavaitenda
is that religion is
ndezvekuti
at
religion
the root
iri
of
pamudzi
global conflict and the harm
wekumakakatano
done in the world today.
epasitenderere
And
muzuva
he
ranhasi.
sees that September 11,
Anoona
he
sekuti
sees this as
September
religion that
11
did that, and
ireligion
therefore he's going to start
naizvozvo
targeting
anotanga
religion. He
kunanga
starts writing a book,
religion,
it's published
otanga
in
kunyora bhuku
a few years later in
ropublishwa
2004,
muna
and
2004.
there's also a flow of books then that
Pane
also come
mabhuku
out by these
anozotanga
atheistic authors.
kunyorwawo
People do
zvapera
challenge
izvi.
him on that. For
Vanhu
example, the
vanomuchallenge
closest the
pane
world has ever
izvozvo.
got to annihilation was the Cold War, and that was
Cold War ndo apo nyika
that was not
yakasvika
religious based.
paannihilation.
That was an atheistic country.
Iyi yaivawo atheistic country, zvaisangova
So,
religion chete.
if you want to see religion as the
Saka kana
cause, then
uchida
you really
kuonawo
need to
kuti
justify
religion
that
ndiyo
with
yega
Stalin. You need
dambudziko,
to
unofana
justify that
kujustify
today with North
Stalin,
Korea.
unogona
Vladimir
kujustify
Putin
North
uses
Korea,
religion as a puppet.
Vladimir
So
Putin.
people challenge him on this, but he really is
Saka munhu
quite, they all
yaanochallenjwa
are quite
nezvese
certain that
izvi,
religion is
asi anoramba akabatira kuti hai religion ndiyo
fundamental cause
dambudziko
of conflict in the
huru
world today.
yemaconflicts ari munyika.
Then in 2006,
Tozoti muna 2006 Richard Dawkins.
Put your hand up in the chat if you've heard of Richard Dawkins.
Sumudzai ruoko rwenyu muchat kana makambonzwa nezvaRichard Dawkins.
That's lots of people. People are putting their hands up. So he's more well known than Sam Harris.
Uyanyanyozikamwa kupfuura Sam Harris.
And this is The God Delusion.
Ndiye akanyora The God Delusion.
So that's also one of these
Ndiyo
books that come out in this history.
bhuku rakabuda munhoroondo iyoyi.
And by 2006,
tazosvika
people
kuna
are actually
2006
giving a name
vanhu
to
vanga
this
vakupa
kind of new
zita
wave
kune
of atheism
wave
and
itsva
a bit of a
yeatheism
change
iyi
within
uye
atheism.
kakuchinja kakakuitika
So in
muatheism.
2006,
2006
four leading
kune
and prominent atheists
vatungamiriri
get
vana
together at one of their homes
maatheist
for a
vakauya
2-hour
pamwe chete
unmoderated
kune imwe
discussion.
imba yavo
The event is
kune discussion
videotaped and
ye2
they
hours
title it The Four
yakatepwa
Horsemen.
pavhidhiyo vakabva
So
vaipa
this
zita
is
rekuti
2007.
4 Horsemen. I 2007
And they title it The Four Horsemen
vakapa zita rekuti The Four Horsemen
because there's four of them, and
nekuti pane
they're
vana
taking it
vavo
from Revelation,
kubva kuna
the four horsemen
Revelation,
of the apocalypse, or what they think is a
varume
non-apocalypse.
vemabhiza
So
vana
they
vaya
title
vemuna
themselves the Four
Revelation
Horsemen, and I
vanozvidaidza
suspect
vachiti
they think that made them look quite
Four
cool as
Horsemen.
well. Two of them we
Vanozvifunga kuti
already know. One
zvinovaradza
of
vari
the
cool.
men is Richard Dawkins.
Umwe vanhu ivavo ainzi Richard Dawkins.
They are still known today
Vachiri kuzivikanwa
as the
muzuva
Four Horsemen.
ranhasi
They're
se4
still
Horsemen.
known today as the four
Muzuva ranhasi
leading
vachiri kuzivikanwa kuti ndivo vari
rational thinkers,
kutungamirira
leaders
chaizvo
of
vanhu vari rational
atheism in the 21st century.
vanofunga
Richard Dawkins was
veatheism
one of the men who
21st
met.
century.
The other man
Richard
was
Dawkins,
Sam Harris,
kwozoita Sam
who wrote
Harris
this 2004 book.
uyo akanyorawo bhuku muna
There was
2004.
two more men,
Kwozoitawo vamwe varume vaviri,
Christopher Hitchens,
Christopher Hitchens,
and one more, Daniel Dennett.
kwozoita umwe anonzi Daniel Bennett.
There was a woman invited, but she had to cancel at the
Pane
last
mudzimai
minute.
akainvaitwa asi akazokansela
I'm going to
pekupedzisira.
mispronounce her
Ndinogona
name.
kusataura zita
Ayaan
rake
Hirsi
zvakanaka.
Ali. She was born in
Ayaan Hirsi
Somalia.
Ali akazvarwa kuSomalia.
She fled to the Netherlands to
Akatiza
escape an
achienda
arranged marriage.
kuNetherlands achitiza
And
kuroorwa kwaiva
became involved in
kwakaarranjwa
Dutch
kure.
politics. She became an
Akapindawo mune
atheistic, rejecting
zvepolitics
the Islamic faith.
achiramba
Became a
faith
vocal
yechiislam.
opponent of Islam,
Akavawo opponent
especially
weislam
concerning women.
nyanyanyanya
She was involved in
zvinoenderana
the production of
nemadzimai.
the film Submission,
Akave
for which her friend Theo Van Gogh was murdered.
neinvolvement
When he
mune
was
firimu
found
yainzi
murdered, a death
Submission
threat to her was
apo
pinned to his
pakaurayiwawo
chest. So she,
munhu iye akabva apiwawo
particularly with
death threat.
feminism in mind,
Vaine
became a
feminism
vocal
mupfungwa.
atheistic spokesperson,
Iye akave atheistic spokesperson.
quite against Islam.
Vari
And
against
these men
vanhu
also
veislam. Vanhu varume avawo zvakare
very much attacking Christianity and
vachiatakawo
Judaism. But
Christianity
in the post
neJudaism.
9/11 world, they
Munyika
have a
yanga
particular
yapfuura
focus on
9/11
Islam.
vanga vakanyanyofokasa pana
But
Islam.
she's kind of considered
Asi,
now as a
iye zvinezvi
honorary fourth woman of the
akuzivikanwa
apocalypse. Fourth
semudzimai
horsewoman.
ane honorary
One of these men passed away,
muapocalypse
so she's
nekuti
kind
umwe
of
murume
spoken
wevarinaari
about
akafa.
as
Iye
taking his
mukadzi
place in some way.
akataurwa kunzi anenge akatora nzvimbo yemumwe wacho akafa uyu neimwe nzira.
And I'm going to read one of my favorite because a lot of
Ndichaverenga
what I have to say
imwe
about them
zvandinofarira.
is not pleasant. So the last handout was Rachel. I think you were responding, just acknowledging
Munhu anga
that you
akasimudza
knew
ruoko
Richard
kupedzisira
Dawkins. But any hands up after
kuti wanga
that?
wakasimudzira kuti unoziva Richard Dawkins asi handina kuzomboona rumwe ruoko.
I don't think there's been anyone wanting to speak yet.
Handifungi kuti pane anga achida kutaura pari zvino.
This is from The Guardian, and I just wanted
Izvi zvinobva
to...
kuThe Guardian. Ndinongodawo kuti
I'm going to get into the positions that these men hold.
tichapinda mumapozisheni anobatwa nevarume
But I did think this point from The Guardian
asi
was
ndakafunga kuti
pertinent.
point
In
yeThe
many ways, the
Guardian
conversation
yakanga
already seems
yakakosha.
dated in its political preoccupations, particularly in the idea proffered by Hitchens that holy war was the greatest existential threat to civilization. And then The Guardian, the author, kind of interjects and says there had been nothing holy about the Cold War, which brought us closest to the brink of planetary Armageddon, and North Korea now is not a theocracy, but never mind. And then one of the men, Hitchens, says, interviewing them, I think it's us, these four men, plus the 82nd Airborne and the 101st, who are the real fighters for secularism at the moment, the ones who are really fighting the main enemy. Hitchens announces with armchair general relish. The 82nd and 101st regiments were those that operated in Iraq and Afghanistan. So what these men are saying is the
Saka
regiment in
zvirikutaurwa
Iraq, the
nevarume ava
regiment in
ndezvekuti regiment
Afghanistan, and
yekuiraq
these four men are the
neyekuafghanistan
three groups fighting
ndo mapoka
for
matatu
secularism,
ari kurwa
fighting against
secularism
religion.
vari kurwa
And
against
I think the
zvezvitendero.
Guardian article isn't very impressed with
Article
these men when it says the other horsemen agree eagerly that they are all
nevarume
very
ava.
brave. But they were in favour of the
asi
Iraq War.
vakanga vachitenderana
Some of their
nezveiraq
positions
war.
didn't date so well.
Mamapositions
But
avo
for them it was
haana
a
kunyanya
fight for secularism, a fight against religion. because religion is what took down the Twin Towers.
Ivo vanoti religion ndo
is what wars
yakadonhedza
have been
Twin
fought over.
Towers.
Religion is what
Ndo
harms
zviri
and kills
kurwirwa,
people.
ndo
So we
inokuvadza
could approach
nekuuraya vanhu.
these men and new atheism
Saka togona
from a few
kuaprocha
different critical
varume
perspectives.
ava
But you
veatheism
know the one,
nemaperspectives
what perspective
akasiyana,
do we want to approach
asi
it from?
tinoziva perspective yatinoda kuti tiaproche navo.
What do we want to find
Ndeipi
out their views on?
perspective yatinoda kuziva nezvavo.
Gender.
Yegender.
Is it that the perspective we're going to?
Ndiyo perspective
So I'm going to
yatichatarisa.
approach it from the
Saka
context of gender.
ndichatarisa necontext yegender.
I'm going to start with Sam Harris.
Ndichatanga naSam Harris.
So just to remind us,
Kungotirangaridza,
atheism changes
atheism inochinja
post-September 11.
tapfuura September
It
11.
is a form of atheism
Atheism
more determined to impact politics
iyo yakanyanya
and
kuda
to
kurerekera
change
kuti
the world
impact
and to
politics
separate
nekuchinja
religion from
nyika
politics. We would agree with
nekuseparata religion
the
kubva
third
kupolitics.
point of that.
Tinobvumirana
And they
nepoint yechitatu yavo.
defend themselves always with
Vanozvidefenda
the thought
vega
that this is
nepfungwa
rational thinking.
yekuti
So if you take
hatinoshandisa
your mind
kufunga
back to
kuri
that Vox
rational.
article,
Ukadzosera pfungwa dzedu
the
kuarticle
fellow
revox
that was
riya,
interviewed heavily in that Vox
munhu
article,
akainterviewa muvox article iri
he's speaking about
aitaura iye
Gamergate, he's speaking about feminism.
nezvegamergate
But what he
nezvefeminism,
constantly comes
asi
in with,
zvaanoramba achidzoka
what he
nazvo,
constantly
zvaanoramba
says to defend
achitaura
his
kuti
worldview
adefende
against others,
muono
against
wake
the left
wenyika
wing, is
against
that
left wing,
his is founded
ndezvekuti
on rational thought.
kufunga kwake
Does that make
kwakawanikwa
sense, Rachel? Does that make sense? Did you also get
pamarational
that from the
thoughts.
Vox article?
Makazvionawo here pamaiverenga article revox riya?
Sorry, Tess, I just getting my computer. What was that question again? Sorry.
Ndidzo kurodzerewo mubvunzo.
In that Vox article,
Muarticle revox
and
riya,
it's kind of in the context of Gamergate.
zviri mucontext yana
What
Gamergate.
the man chiefly being interviewed, I forget his name.
Murume uya
What they're
aiinterview
how he's constantly defending his position,
kuti anoramba achidefenda position yake,
and those that are in the same boat as him,
uye avo
is
vari
that
muboto
these men,
akafanana
they
naye.
are the defenders of rational thought.
Varume
They
ava
defend the
vanozviti tisu
defenders of all that is
tinodefenda
rational
rational
in the
thought,
world.
tisu
And it
tiri
is
rational munyika
feminism,
ino.
and that's where those few paragraphs bring in religion, that this is all irrational.
Vanobva
It's
vati
emotional,
feminism ndiyo iri
it's
irrational.
superstitious, it's irrational.
Eh.
Did you get this similar perspective?
Makavawo nekuonawo kwakafanana ikoko?
Yeah, I did. Thank you for
Hongu
explaining
ndakaona
that.
saizvozvo maita basa.
You cut out right at the end, sorry.
Handina kunzwa kwekupedzisira, sorry.
So having a bit of technical problems. Yeah, I agree.
Oh,
with what
ndachiti
you're saying.
ndinobvumirana nezvamamuchitaura.
What the perspective that he was bringing
Perspective yaaiunza.
back, I think so.
It seemed that every time his views were challenged,
Zvinoita kuti
his
pese apo
underlying
maviews
defense
ake
was
aichallenjwa,
that he
defense
was
yake
part
yava
of a
yekuti
group of people,
ini ndiri
mostly
mumwe
men,
weboka
who
revarume
were not buying into the emotionalism of the left wing,
vasingazotengi
that they were
emotionalism yeve-left
centered
wing,
on rational thought.
ivo
And
vachizviti
that is why
vanoshandisa
you see
rational
this
thought.
connection in that trinity with
Ndozvaanoti
atheism.
ndo patinoona connection
That they would
netrinity
see
iyi
feminism as
neveatheism, kuti
irrational,
vanoona
just
feminism
as they see
iri
religion and a
irrational
belief in God as
sezvavanoona
irrational.
religion nebelief muna Mwari zviri irrational.
So coming back to Sam Harris, I just want to
Todzokera
screen
kuna
share for a
Sam
moment and
Harris,
show
ndinoda kungoshare screen
these
yangu
men just so we can
kwechinguva
connect.
kuti tigone kubatanidza.
Just so we can connect faces to
Tigone
names.
kubatanidza
I'll take us
mafase
to a photo of
kumazita.
2007.
Ndo tidzosera kufoto yekuna 2007.
This is the four men.
ava ndo varume
the
vaya
four
vanhu
horsemen of the
vanozviti
four
ma4
horsemen.
horsemen.
And they're still known today as the four
Muzuva
horsemen.
ranhasi vachiri
This is in the
kungozivikanwa kuti
2007
ma4 horsemen. Ndi
meeting that they
2007
had, that they
musangano
recorded.
wavakava
So going
navo
from right to
wavakarekodha.
left,
Tichibva
we have
kuruboshwe
on the far right
tichibva
there
kurudyi tichienda
is
kuruboshwe
Sam Harris.
tina Sam Harris.
Left next to him, I'm pretty sure that's
Uyo
Richard
ari padivi
Dawkins.
pake ndii
And I
Richard
hope I don't get
Dawkins.
this wrong. The man next to him with the beard, I believe, is Daniel Dennett.
Ane ndebva
And
ari
then the
padivi
fourth
pake
left is
ndiye
Christopher
Bennett.
Hitchens. So from
Then
left, Christopher
wekupedzisira
Hitchens,
ndiye
Daniel Dennett,
Hitchens.
Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris. Just so we can put some faces
Kuti
to
tigone
names.
kungoisa
And now I'm
mazita
going
avo
to just speak about
kumafesi
Sam
avo.
Harris.
Ndichataura
So I
nezvaHarris.
will highlight him. He's quite the guru today.
Sam Harris
I guess
ndiye
the
mukuru
best way I
wazvo
can think
nhasi.
of describing him
Ndinogona
would be
kumudescribe
the
zvakanaka
atheist Jordan Peterson.
senge ndiye Jordan Peterson wekuma-atheist.
But I think their audience can often overlap.
Asi ndofunga kuti audience yavo inowanzo
that's not-
overlap.
That's my quote. My computer updated and I'm having a few. That is a photo of
Uyu
Sam
ndiwo
Harris,
mufananidzo
who we're
waSam
about to
Harris
discuss.
wataakuda kutaura nezvake.
His influence today,
Influence
I
yake
think, is
nhasi
probably extending in some ways beyond,
inoextenda
especially what has been since 2001,
kupfuura izvo zvakaitika
with
2001.
that generation continuing, current generation of
ichiramba
younger,
ichikontinua
younger, mostly
vechidiki
men.
nyanye-nyanye vanhurume
The same way you would see Jordan
nenzira
Peterson or Ben
yakafanana
Shapiro,
yatinoona
but
Jordan
Jordan Peterson and
Ben
Ben
Shapiro.
Shapiro are less targeting
Asi
religion.
ava vaviri ava vanyanyi
But even if
kutageta
you're a
religion.
Protestant in
Asi
the
kunyange
United
uri
States,
Protestant
today
kuUnited
you're highly
States
likely
nhasi
to believe in evolution.
unogona kubhilivha mune zveevolution.
The base for these men
Base yevarume
is quite
ava
broad, and they have had extensive
yakanyatsokupamhamha
influence.
ende vane influence yakakura
In
zvakadai.
2014, so I think
2014
I know that James did it. I think it was
ndofunga kuti
last
James
week. I
akazviita
think you were going to do it soon,
kana
Brendan. But one of
taizozviita
you was going to soon speak
Brendan
on
kana James
2014 and all of the
vaizotarisa 2014
points that happened in
nezvinhu
2014.
zvakaitika zvese muna
In
2014.
2014,
Muna 2014
Sam Harris was
Sam
interviewed
Harris
by Michelle
akainterviewiwa
Borstein of the Washington
naMichelle
Post. And she
wekuWashington
asked
Post.
him, why are most
Akamubvunza kuti
atheists
sei
male?
kuma-atheists vakawanda
And Sam
vari
Harris answered
varume.
her.
Sam Harris
He
akamupindura
says,
akati
I think it may have to do with my
ndofunga kuti zvine
person's slant as
chekuita
an author, being very critical of
nechekunyora
bad
kwangu
ideas.
ini
He speaks in a very philosophical way,
ndiri
so I'm going
critical
to try and
chaizvo.
paraphrase it for my own sake as well as yours. So he says that he's an
Ndichaparaphrase.
author,
Iye anoti
and
ndiri
being an
munyori.
author,
Kuve munyori
it comes with the territory that you're very
zvinouya
critical of bad
neteritori
ideas.
yekuti
And
unenge
he
uri
says this
critical
can sound
nemabad
very angry to
ideas.
people. People just don't like to have their ideas criticized.
Vanhu havadi kuti maideas avo ange
Okay, I'll quote
achicriticize.
it directly so not everyone
Ndinokota
knows
zviri
what's a quote.
direct kuti vanhu
And
vese
then my
vazive kuti
paraphrase.
iquotation
I
ndini
think it may have to
ndozoparaphrase.
do with my person's slant as an author being very critical of bad ideas. This can sound very angry to people. People just don't like to have their ideas criticized. There's something about that critical posture that is to some degree intrinsically male and more attractive to guys than to women, he said. The atheist variable just has this. It doesn't obviously have this nurturing, coherence-building, extra estrogen vibe that you would want by default if you want to attract as many women as men. Okay, I won't paraphrase that. Catherine, you heard it, you didn't read it. I'd like you to paraphrase that.
Catherine, wanzwa zvataverenga ndoda kuti utiitirewo paraphrase.
Us males were really good at
Anoti isu
thinking
varume
rationally and critically, and
tinonyatsogona
we're not
zvokufunga
the
zviri
nurturing
rational
type.
nezviri critical.
So therefore,
Hatisi
because
vari
atheism
nurturing.
tends to require an objective, critical mind,
zvinoda
it feels
pfungwa
to men more than
inonyatsokufunga
women.
zvakarodza
That's how I
iri
see it.
critical ndokunzwisisa kwandazviita.
I think that that's a accurate portrayal.
Ndofunga kuti zviri accurate.
women have this extra estrogen
kuti vadzimai
so they need
vane
the
estrogen yakati
coherence
wandei
building that he's
saka
suggesting you would find in religion. But atheism, you
vanodawo
have to
zvinowanikwa
be critical of
mureligion,
bad ideas,
asi atheism tiri
and
critical
that
nemaideas
is
ari band
intrinsically male.
ende
So I want
yakanyanya
us to
kuwandira
remember this is someone
kuvarume.
who does not believe in God,
Ndoda kuti ticonsider
creation, or
relationship
the
iyo
Bible,
yevanhu
or religion, and
vasingabhilivhi
he's
muna
talking
Mwari
about what is
kana
intrinsically
kubhaibheri,
male
inenge
and
ichitaura
intrinsically
nezvevanhu
female.
vari
Now
male
there's a
chete
problem.
kana kuti
There
vari
are many
female chete.
female atheists
Kune
who are
maatheist vari
atheistic
female vakawanda,
because, like that woman we spoke of,
semunhu
fled
watataura
Somalia
nezvake
fleeing forced marriage.
anotaura zveforced marriage, anenge achiedza kuwana imba kuatheistic community. Saka akakritisizwa nezvaizvozvo, akaresponda criticism iyi neblog post yakareba yandisingazoverengi yese nekuti yakareba chaizvo. Inonzi handisi sexist pig wamuri kutarisa nezvayo.
In the time-honored bigot strategy of saying it's not bigotry if it's true. So he kind of doubled down on it. And he also, one of his defenses, and I think Elder Terry, considering Scott Morrison's comments and those comments made in
Scott Morrison
context of sexism in the Australian Parliament, all of that comes flooding back when one of his defenses is, I was raised by a single mother, I have 2 daughters, most of my editors have been women, and my first, last, and best editor is always my wife. They always go back to that, and for me that is the gendered example of finding a person of color at a Trump rally, making sure that he's on camera, putting him right behind Trump, but slightly off center, so Trump doesn't block him because everyone needs to know that he's there. This is always comes into the defense. I think this was Scott Morrison's defense for why he handled sexism and abuse in Australian politics so badly. His kind of defense was, I have daughters, and that's also part of his defense as to why he is not the quote sexist pig you're looking for. So he didn't handle that very well, and a lot of women who are leaders in the atheistic community have not forgiven him for that. These are the 4 leaders. You get lower down in people who are heavily involved, and there are women, but these are the 4 horsemen. They're known for that. So that's Sam Harris, and it does get worse with him.
Kuna Sam Harrison anotaurawo zvimwe
If we don't have comments, I want to move on to
kana musina
Richard Dawkins.
macomments ndodzokerawo ndofambira mberi kuna Richard Dawkins.
In 2011, Rebecca Watson, who is a prominent female atheist, in 2011 she was on a panel discussion where she spoke of sexism and misogyny within the atheistic community. She's kind of a prominent female speaker on the subject of atheism and feminism, and she's had a bit to say about the misogyny that exists in that community. In 2011, she was in a foreign country. She spoke at this panel. She went to a bar afterwards and hung out with a few people, and they continued to speak. And then at 4 a.m., she left to go to her hotel room. And she got into the elevator to go to her hotel room, and one of the men followed her into the elevator. And he said to her, I like what you had to say. How about we keep talking? Come back to my hotel room. In her next blog post, because she would post regular blog posts, she spoke about how her week had been, about the panel discussions, and in this 8-minute blog post, for about 30 seconds, just kind of telling the story of how her week had gone. She mentioned what happened in this elevator, and she said, I'm going to speak to the men. Don't do that. Just please don't do that. She says, I was in a foreign country. It was 4 a.m. I was alone in an elevator, and I had just spoken for some hours of how easy it is for me to be sexualized in this community. And don't just if you're going to understand what I'm
kana
saying,
muchinzwisisa
don't
zvandichataura
proposition me in elevators of
musauya
4
kwandiri
a.m. And that
muelevheta
it was
please.
short what she said. Richard Dawkins took to Twitter,
Richard Dawkins
and
akabva
I won't
aendesa
read
kutwitter
his
manje
whole. It was a long
handizoverengi
post that he put
post yake
out,
yese
but the
yakareba
first 4 words
yaakaisa
say, "Stop
asi
whining, will you?"
akati musaramba
That's the
musakomplaina imi
tone, and it continues in
ndo
that
title yacho.
fashion. The rest of it is a description of how bad life is for women
zvinozotaura
in
kuti
Saudi Arabia,
asi tanga kuti
in Islamic
makambotarisa
countries,
vakadzi vari kusaudi arabia
how they'll be
nekumaIslamic
stoned
countries
for
upenyu hwavo
cheating on
hwakashata
their
sei.
husband. And he has said publicly before he just wants American women
kutaurawo
to shut
pachena
up
kuti anongoda kuti
because
vadzimai vekuamerica
it's so
vanyarare
much, stop
nekuti
speaking of if someone, inappropriately touches you at the water cooler at work. Big deal. Look what it is like for women in other countries.
anotarisaiwo madzimai ari kune dzimwe nyika.
So he writes this blog post, this Twitter post, making that point. But it starts off with "Stop whining, will you?"
rinotanga richiti "Stop whining, will you?"
People don't take that well, as you might expect. And women
madzimai
within that atheistic community
mukati
write to him and
mecommunity
say,
yeatheism iyi vanomunyorera votanga kuti
"There's starvation in East Africa right now. You stop caring that creationism is being taught in American schools. If you're going to make an argument that it's worse somewhere else, stop caring what is taught in schools. Just let them teach creationism and go and deal with what is worse in other parts of the world." And he responds to that argument and says, "No, I wasn't making the point. It wasn't about that it's just worse in other parts of the world." And I want to read his second criticism
yake yechipiri
Rebecca Watson.
yaRebecca Watson.
Richard Dawkins says, "The man in the elevator didn't physically touch her, didn't attempt to bar her way out of the elevator, didn't even use foul language at her. He spoke some words to her, just words. She no doubt replied with words. That was that. Words. Only words, and apparently quite polite words at that. Rebecca's feeling that the man's proposition was creepy was her own interpretation of his behaviour, presumably not his." So stopping there for a second, she found the interaction creepy, but that's just her interpretation of his behaviour. Going back to quoting, "She was probably offended to about the same extent as I, Richard Dawkins, am offended if a man gets into an elevator with me chewing gum. But he does me no physical damage, and I simply grin and bear it until either I or he gets out of the elevator. It would be different if he physically attacked me." So Richard Dawkins, this is, I'm only pulling out one example of, actually I have a second, so one or two examples of how Richard Dawkins has responded to the response. This is 2011, the Me Too movement hasn't even begun. So you can imagine how he is now. Many, even atheists today, are just wishing he would be quiet. But these are the 4 men who led atheism into the 21st century. These men, more than any other, have moulded the thinking, the minds of the millions of men who hold to that far-right trinity: libertarianism, philosophy,
libertarian philosophy,
and men's rights.
nemarights evarume.
And atheism is it's broader than just what Richard Dawkins says. It's about evolution, and it's about how men and women developed over millennia.
varume nevakadzi vakadevelopa sei kwemakore akapfuura.
So his argument is that American women are making a big deal over nothing. And I also want us to see his other point in that quote. And this is something that shows also the connection between atheism, the leaders of atheistic thought, and libertarianism. It is all about free speech. And remember, this woman didn't ask for the man who propositioned her in an elevator to be jailed or to be punished. All she's asking is for them to stop. So him taking that as an attack on free speech shows the extent to which to the extent to which libertarian
zvinotiratidza
thought and
extent
the idea of
iyo
freedom and free speech
yelibertarian thought nepfungwa
has linked
yefreedom of
with
speech kuti
the
zvakabatana
second part of
sei
the Trinity. You see all three parts of the Trinity
neatheism,
in that
second
quote.
part
There is the
yetrinity.
atheism because it's Richard
Unoona
Dawkins, and we'll get into
atheism
why they're
nekuti
so
muna Richard Dawkins
misogynistic.
muquotation uyu
But you
ari
also see the men's
misogynistic.
rights, and you also
Wozoonawo
see the
men's rights,
libertarianism because it's all
wozoonawo
about
kuti
freedom of speech.
libertarianism nekuti
And
ndezve
it
freedom
is
of
these
speech.
men, especially
Varume
I think
ava
Sam Harris more than we might
nyanyanyanya Sam
realize,
Harris
who from 2001
kubva muna
as
2001
young men
semurume
were
wechidiki
trying to understand
apo
9/11
vaizama kunzwisisa
in its context, trying to understand the Iraq
vaizama
War
kunzwisisa
and
Iraq
religion
War,
and society
religion
as
and
religion was
society.
losing
Apo
power in
religion
the
yakanga
United
ichirusa
States
masimba
and
muunited
secularism was
States,
growing.
secularism ichikura.
A large proportion of young men were
Namba
following
huru yevarume
this
vechidiki vaitevera
type of philosophy.
iyi philosophy iyoyi.
We have no thoughts or comments.
Hapana nekutaura kana
Lots of people are
macomments.
listening today. I
Vazhinji
might
vari
get their thoughts
kuteerera
next week.
nhasi ndogona kuzonzwa pfungwa dzavo vhiki rinotevera.
But I want to go to a worse example.
Asi ndakuzoenda kune
There's
example iri
a
worse.
few with Richard Dawkins.
Kune mamwe akati wandei maexample naRichard Dawkins.
I think this is a little bit more recent.
Pane imwe yakaitika manje
There is
manje.
another prominent skeptic writer,
Pane mumwe
Michael
munyori
Shona.
anonzi Michael Shona.
He's not one of the horsemen,
Haasi mumwe wemahorsemen aya.
but he is still prominent
Asi achiri nemukurumbira
in the atheistic community.
mucommunity yeveatheist.
He's a writer,
Munyori
and
uye
a couple of women
madzimai
came out and
vakawanda
accused him of sexual harassment.
vakauya vakamuakisa
And then a third
nezvesexual
woman-
harassment. Mumwe mudzimai
So two
wechitatu.
women claimed that he had sexually
Saka
harassed them. And then
vadzimai
a
vaviri
third woman
vakaacusa zvesexual harassment.
then
Then
spoke out
wechitatu
and
akabva
told a
ataura
story that he
akataura
had
stori
taken
yekuti
her to his room
akanga
while
amuendesa
she was
kurumu yake
extremely drunk
apo akanga
and too
akadhakwa
drunk to consent, and
akadhakwa
that he
zvekuti
had had
aisagona
sex with her.
kubvumirana kuti varare
She
vese.
had not wanted that to happen,
Iye
but she
aisada
had
kuti
been
zvinge
drunk, and
zvaitika asi anga
that is rape,
akadhakwa
even though
uye
it's
uku
not everyone
kurepwa
agrees with calling that
kunyange
rape.
vanhu
It's rape.
vasingabvumirani nazvo asi
She
kurepwa
had not given consent.
akanga asina kubvumirana nazvo.
So two women accused
Saka
Michael
varume
Shona of sexual
vaviri
harassment. The
vanoacusa
third comes
Michael
out
Shona
and tells the story
nesexual harassment.
of her being
Wechitatu
very
anobva
drunk and what he did
azotaura
to her.
nyaya yake
And
yekuti
Richard
akaitwa sei.
Dawkins again
Richard
took to
Dawkins
Twitter.
zvakare anobva aendesa kutwitter
Quoting Richard Dawkins,
tichimukota
he's speaking sarcastically.
anotaura
Officer, it's not
zvinesakasa.
my fault if I was drunk driving. You see, somebody
haisi
got me
fault yangu
drunk.
kana ndandakadhakwa ndichidrive.
What he did is he compared being forced to have sex
akakompera
with the choice to
kumanikidzwa
drive
kurara
drunk. So in other words,
nekudhriva
if you
wakadhakwa. Saka
get drunk and
nedzimwe
get
nzira
behind the wheel of
kana
a
iwe
car and
ukadhakwa
crash, you're
ukadriva
responsible
mota
for that.
uri
This woman in getting
responsible
drunk,
kwazviri.
he's saying,
Mudzimai
was
uyu
responsible then for what happened to her.
achidhakwa anoti saka
Again,
ari
he did
responsible
face
kune
some
zvakaitika
criticism.
kwaari.
He doubled down by
Akawana
suggesting that rape
criticism.
victims are the real predators out to get men
Ataura
in jail.
achiti marape
Quoting,
victims
if you
ndivo
want to be in a
mapredators
position to
vandangoti varume
testify
vaende
and jail a
mujeri.
man, don't get drunk. So in
Vanzi
other
kana
words, the man is the victim
vanoti iwe
because
murume
the
ndiye
woman got
victim
drunk and
nekuti
now she
mukadzi
can
uyu
testify
akadhakwa
and put him in
saka
jail.
haakugona kukuendesa iwe kujeri.
The article is critical of his position and says that it's for someone who's supposedly rationalist.
Munhu uyu
And this is a
anofanira kunge
problem with
achizviti
the
ari
entire
rationalist.
rationalist
Ndo
community.
dambudziko
Dawkins
nekufunga
refuses to even
kwavanoti kuri
acknowledge the basic
rationalistic.
difference between making the choice to break the law and being the victim of a crime. But only for rape, of course. It's unlikely Dawkins would think it's your fault if you are standing there minding your own business while drunk and someone hits you for no reason. But if the assault occurs with a penis instead of a fist, in Dawkins' mind, suddenly it's the victim that's at fault. Again, this situation is no outlier. Dawkins has spent the past few years using Twitter as a platform to rail against feminists for daring to speak up about sexual harassment and abuse. He not only rushed to Sherman's defence regarding allegations of sexual assault, but rushed to Sam Harris's defence regarding allegations of sexism, even though Harris's sexism is so off the charts it becomes downright comical. Sadly, this contempt for women coming from the top trickles into the ranks, allowing everyday misogynists who happen not to believe in God to feel justified in their hatred of women anyway. Subsequently, there's a thriving online community of people who live to harass not just women, but female atheists in particular. Some of these articles I'm quoting from are written by, not leading, because they're all men, but still prominent female atheists. Some of which have written books talking about their escape from trying to escape from the atheism community. Richard Dawkins sarcastically noted in his post that amazingly, males have rights too. So he seems very concerned about freedom and feminism as a weapon against to target and imprison men.
Anona feminism ne freedom zviri weapon yekutageta vanhu.
Someone wrote about it's quite libertarian, it sounds libertarian, it's all okay in the elevator until she gets physically attacked. Because this man in the elevator,
murume elevator
he has to have the freedom
aifana kunge aine freedom
to speak, to proposition.
Kuti aite proposal yake.
Again, even in that elevator, you see equality.
Unoona inequality.
As a woman being treated with respect in society, equality, coming into conflict with
equality
free speech.
Zvakare nenyaya yefree
I think Richard Dawkins would be the first to say, I might not agree with what he said, but I'll defend to the death his right to say it, which is exactly what he just did. He took to Twitter to defend this man's right to sexually harass a woman. And again, she wasn't calling for this man's imprisonment, she was just asking for societal change. So it gets worse, if it can. I don't know if it's quite worse. Roy, did I miss your hand? Or was that, have I missed people wanting to speak? Was that a hand raised? Or was that for something before?
Oh, that was just before. It was just from before when you asked, did anyone have any comments or questions? And I just put my hand up there. I keep thinking as you're talking about freedom over equality and the argument. I may not agree, but I'll fight, till the death for your right to speak. To me, it seems like just hypocritical. To me, it just seems like hypocrisy. I don't know if anyone else sees it like that. That's the way it stands out to me. Yeah, very hypocritical. That was all.
I really want to get into that.
It might be a hard way. Sorry?
You finished?
Oh, no, I was just going to say it might be an unusual way to describe it, but that's just the way I see it. Yeah.
He wasn't defending her right to speak. There is a hypocrisy there, and I want to get into that hypocrisy, especially when it comes to libertarianism. Josephine.
I was just going to make a comment on Richard Dawkins' comment. If you get drunk and you drive and you have an accident, then it's your fault, right? So if you... and then he says something about the woman. If you drink and you get harassed, then it's your fault. Obviously, that's not very rational to me. And I'm thinking about if a girl, because this came up in a conversation recently, well, she was teasing him, so she didn't quite see it like that, but no wonder she was sexually harassed.
Sexually harassed.
That's a woman defending a man for doing such a thing. I just didn't agree with that, and I don't agree with Richard, of course. It's sad that it happens that a woman, and she's supposed to be Christian, and she's supposed, but she's talking like an atheist.
It's not a thought process that's restricted to Christianity, because we've seen that over and over again within Protestantism and Adventism, saying, well, she just shouldn't dress that way. And now you're seeing it reflected within the most prominent leaders of atheism. And you could say it's not rational, but in their minds it is. Because, okay, say I drink, I get behind the wheel of my car, I drive, and I hit a brick wall. I don't get out of my car and say, I'm sorry, officer, but it's the brick wall's fault. The brick wall shouldn't have been there. It was my getting drunk and getting behind the wheel. No officer is going to blame the brick wall. So when a woman gets drunk and is raped, it's kind of like turning the man into the brick wall. The brick wall can't help it. What is he saying about the man? He's just saying the man can't help it. Why can't the man help it?
Because he's the brick wall.
A brick wall can't help it if I get drunk around my car. So if say I am attractive, and I don't think I am because I'm a woman in the 21st century and we're broken, but say I think I'm attractive and I get drunk and I flirt with a man, how does he then become, in Richard Dawkins' mind, the brick wall? How does that become my fault and not his? Because he's just a brick wall. Brick wall does what a brick wall does. Josephine or anyone, I'm looking for hands.
Josephine,
Richard Dawkins is really big on evolution. I think he might approach it from this perspective of men and their biology, and I don't know, this animal side of them that they can't sort of control.
Richard Dawkins anenge evolution anenge anoona varume kuti vane iyo side yavo yakaita kunge mhuka yavasingagoni kuzvicontrol.
Yeah, because they believe in cultural feminism, kind of thinking that there's this innate difference between the sexes.
Vanotarisa kuti
men are inherently
varume
maybe I don't know, they've got their particular way of operating. I don't know what word to use.
I went back to Sam Harris and just used the words women have the extra estrogen vibe.
Yes, so the men have got the testosterone, and I guess if you compare contrast, yeah. So they're just driven by the testosterone. So they can't help it. Animal instincts take over. The testosterone goes up, and what do you think is going to happen? What do you expect him to do? Can't help it.
Yeah. Lynn.
I was pretty much going to say a similar thing, that they may consider, this view considers males to be logical and rational, except when it comes to sexual stuff. Then they can't help anything. Then it's basically the testosterone takes over, and clearly logic and rationalism goes out the window. So yeah. It's just basically an excuse that men can't help these things, and if women flaunt themselves, then women are responsible for what happens to them. So, completely powerless, apparently, when it comes to that.
Vari powerless kana zvakuendana
You have the
nazvo.
extra estrogen vibe compared and contrasted with
Estrogen
whatever
vibe
makes a man as responsible as Paul
neyekuti
when he rapes a
chii chinoita
drunk
kuti murume
attractive woman.
aite responsible sezvakaita break off kana
And
mukadzi
I think it's
akadhakwa
relevant to
akauya
tie
kwaari.
that into
Zviri
their belief
relevant
system. What is
kuzvibatanidza
it about atheism that appeals to men's rights
nezveatheistic
groups?
system.
What
Chiicho
is it about men's rights
kuatheism
groups that appeals to
chinoapira
atheism?
kumen's rights
And what is
groups.
it about libertarian philosophy
Chiicho
that suits both?
chelibertarian philosophy chinozvibatanidzawo
I know we're
neatheism.
getting close out of time,
Ndoziva
but
kuti
I
nguva
want to
yedu
spend
yapera,
a little time
asi dangopedza wakanguva kadiki
Christopher Hitchens.
tiri pana Christopher
Christopher
Hitchens.
Hitchens
Christopher Hitchens
wrote an article in
akanyora article
2007
muna
for Vanity Fair.
2007 vachinyorera vevanity
And I'm
fair.
not joking, the article is
Handisi
titled
kumbojoka, article
Why
yacho
Women
inonzi
Aren't Funny.
Why Women Aren't Funny.
Apparently
Sei
this was one
madzimai
of his favorite
vasingasekesi.
subjects to
Ndiyo
explain
yaiva
why women
favorite
aren't funny.
subject yevanity
And
fair. Nekuti
ironically enough, I perhaps manically laughed through most of the article. But I
ndakaseka
think that was
muarticle
not the
reseri.
type of humor that he was
Asi haisiriyo
laughed
huma
at he was
yaaitarisira
describing.
kuti
So
ndinge
Christopher Hitchens
yaaidescribe.
writes
Christopher Hitchens 2007
article Why Women Aren't Funny.
kuti sei madzimai
And I'm just going to
vasingasekesi.
read some excerpts of it.
Ndichaverenga
He
zvimwe
says, now why is
zvaanonyora.
this? Why is it the case that women aren't funny?
Sei madzimai
I mean, why women
vasingasekesi.
who have the whole male world at their mercy
Avo
not
vane
funny?
varume vese
Please do not pretend not to know
pamberi
what I'm
pavo.
talking about.
Sei
Why are
vasingaseki.
men, taken on average and as a whole, funnier than women?
Sei
Well,
varume
for one
vachisekesa
thing,
kupfuura
they had
vakadzi.
well better be.
Vanotofanira
Going to
kunge
skip these swear words
vachisekeswa.
through this. The chief task in life that a man has to
Basa
perform
guru iro
is that of
murume anofanira
impressing the
kuita
opposite
muupenyu
sex.
ndere
And Mother
kuimpresa
Nature,
opposite
as we
sex.
laughingly call her, is not so kind to men. So I
Asi
want us to pay
Mother Nature
attention to a
havana
couple of
tsitsi kune
things as I
varume
read
ava.
excerpts of this
Ndoda kuti
article.
tipay
Is
attention apa
one,
ndiri kuverenga.
first of all, he says,
Chekutanga anoti
don't pretend not to know what I'm talking about. In other words,
musayepedzera kunge
he's saying,
musinganzwisisi
think
zvandiri
rationally.
kutaura. Ari kuti
Don't think
fungai zviri
emotionally where
rational.
you think, oh, this isn't
Musafunga
very
zviri
good to talk
emotional.
about. Just think rationally and then
Ngofungai
stop
zviri
denying,
rational.
pretending you don't know what I'm talking
Musanyepedzera kunge
about
musiri
as if
kuziva zvandiri kutaura.
women are as funny as men.
Kuti
But also
varume
pick up on how he
vakadzi havasekesi
consistently
kupfuura varume.
places men as the
Anobva
victims
aisawo varume
in
vari
society,
mavictim
as the
society.
suppressed in
Kuti ndo
society,
vakadzvanyirirwa
as men
musociety.
who are suffering in
Ndo
society.
vari kusafa
It's men who have a
musociety.
hard lot in life.
Ndo vari nelodi
First of all,
yakakurisa
women have the
musociety.
whole male world at their
Chekutanga
mercy.
vakadzi vane
Also hard on men. Mother Nature is not kind to men. The chief task in life that a man has to
basa
perform
guru
is to
revarume
impress women.
nderekuti
So
vafadze
again,
vakadzi.
consistently
Saka
says that
anoramba
women
achingotaura
are
kuti
the ones that
vakadzi
hold the power in
ndivo
society.
vanobata simba musociety.
Men are the vulnerable ones, the
Varume
victims.
ndo
Women
vari
have all the
vulnerable,
power
ndo
because
mavictims.
women choose a
Nekuti
sexual partner,
vakadzi
and women
vanochuza
do not have to
sexual
try so
partner.
hard
Havafaniri
because
kuedza
he'll
zvakasimba.
tell us women have no
Nekuti
corresponding need to appeal to
anoti
men in this
vakadzi
way
havana need
by being funny.
corresponding
They already appeal to men if you catch my drift. Nudge, nudge.
yekufadza varume.
So what he's saying is
Asi vese
trying
vanoapila
to explain
kuvanhurume.
why
Saka ari
men
kuzama
are more
kutaura
funny
kuti sei
than women.
varume vachinyanyo
And
kusekesa
he's
kupfuura
going to give quite a
vakadzi.
few
Anobva
arguments for
apa
this, but
maarguments
one
akati
of them
imwe
is
yacho
that
ndeyekuti
men,
varume
by the dictates of Mother Nature, evolution,
sekudictata kunoita Mother Nature
men's
kana
fundamental
evolution.
role in life is to impress a woman so
Basa
he can
guru
have sex, so
revarume
they can procreate, have a
nderekuimpresa
baby, and
madzimai
continue the human
kuti
race.
vagowana
Women don't have to
kuwanana
try so
nekurara
hard to
vese
impress
nekugadzira
men
vana.
because they have
Vakadzi
a
havanakwanisi
body
kuda kutraya
to
zvakanyanya kuti
use
vaimprese
instead of a
vanhurume.
personality and a sense of humor, apparently. He tries to save it from being sexist
Anobva
by
ada
saying that
kuti
women do have a sense of humor
vakadzi
because if they
vanoita
didn't, they
kusekesa
wouldn't
kwavainako.
laugh at how funny men are.
Nekuti kana vanga vasina
And there are some good
havazoseki
female
kuti
comedians, but,
zvine
quoting him,
zvataurwa nevarume.
in any case, my
Nemamwe
argument doesn't
madzimai
say
vari
that there are no
macomedians.
decent women
Handisi
comedians.
kuti kune
There are more
macomedians
terrible female
madzimai vari
comedians
decent.
than there are terrible male comedians. But there are some impressive
macomedians
ladies out
vechirume
there.
vasingagoni.
Male humor prefers the laugh to be at someone's expense
Humor yechirume
and understands that
inoprefera
life
kuti
is quite possibly a joke to begin with, and often a
vanhu
joke in
vaseke
extremely
uye
poor
kuti vaone
taste.
kuti life
Humor is part
pachezvayo
of the
itori
armor
joke.
plate with which to resist what is already farcical enough, life. Perhaps not by coincidence, battered as they are, by MF Nature, men tend to refer to life itself as a bitch, whereas women, bless their tender hearts, would prefer that life be fair and even sweet rather than the sordid mess it actually is. There are so many layers of misogyny through this, I don't know where to
Kune
start.
malayers akawanda emisogyn
But to
pane
pull out
zvaverenga
one,
handizivi kuti ndotangira papi asi kuti
men
tipule
use
out
humor as a
chimwe chete.
defense
Varume
mechanism
vanoshandisa
to
humor
cope with
kana
life
kuseka sedefense
because they see
mechanism
life
kuti
as it is.
vakope nelife.
Women,
Vanoona life
bless their
sezvairi.
tender hearts, which doesn't
Madzimai
endear
komboreraiwo
you,
mwoyo yavo
would prefer that
yakafara.
life be fair. If you break that
Vanoprefer
down, what
kuti
he's
life inge
saying
iri
is
fair.
that men see the world
Ukatsemura
rationally.
izvi unoti
And when they see
unoona
it
kuti vari kuti varume
rationally,
vanoona
as the
nyika iri
sordid
rational.
mess it
Pavanoona iri
is,
rational
they need humor as like a
vanonidawo
protective plate
kuseka
to cope with
kuti
life.
kuvaprotect
Women,
kuti
preferring
vakwanise
life to be fair and
kurarama
sweet,
upenyu.
don't need that
Madzimai
protective mechanism.
vanoprefer upenyu kuti
This
hunge huri
point
fair huri
directly
sweet.
contradicts a future point he makes that women have to be far more serious because
Anoti
they
madzimai
are
vanofana
programmed
kunge vari
to try and keep
serious
a baby alive, and that's so serious that they can't have a sense of humor.
nekuti vanofana
Precisely
madzimai
because humor is a sign
vakwanise
of
kuzvara
intelligence,
saka
and many
havawanikwa
women
vachiseka
believe or were
zvakanyanya.
taught by their mothers that they become threatening to men if they appear too bright. It could be that in some way men do not want women to be funny. The only thing he says I agree with. Men want women as an audience, not as rivals. I agree. And there is a huge brimming reservoir of male unease which it would be too easy for women to exploit. Again, what Christopher Hitchens does there is he says maybe, just
zvinoitwa
maybe,
naChristopher Hitchens anoti pamwe
men
varume
find women threatening if they appear
vanowana
too bright.
vakadzi
Men
vachithreatena.
prefer to be the
Varume
speakers to an
vanoprefer kunge vari
audience.
vanotaura
Men don't want
kumaaudience.
women as rivals,
Havadi kuti
so it
vakadzi
suits
vange
women
vari
to be
marivals.
quieter and not
Saka
try
zvinobva
to,
zvafanira kuti vakadzi vange vakanyararawo
fill that
vakapfava.
role. But even that sexism, he
Kunyange sexism
immediately puts
iyoyi
that into
anobva
a
azviisa
context which says
mucontext
there's all of
yekuti
this male unease, and that gives some women something to exploit. So again, who's the victim?
zvobva
Men don't want
zvaita
women
kuti
as
vakadzi
rivals.
vakwanise
Men just want
kuexploit.
women as an audience.
Saka victim
Men
ndiani?
want women to appear less intelligent. That's something women can exploit. It's a vulnerability men have. So again, can
Kuti
you see
varume vane
how he turns
mavulnerability
men
avainawo
into the
ataurwa.
victims and women
Zvinobva zvaita
to
kuti
suddenly,
vakadzi
even though
vaexploite
he's just said
izvozvo.
they have to
Zvinobva
appear less
zvaita kuti
intelligent
varume vange vari
to
mavictims.
be tolerated in society, how he twists that around to again make men the
Anobva
victims.
azvishonyorora kuti ivo vazviite mavictims.
He goes into what Gina Rippon would heavily disagree with, trying to explain brain function, to explain why
achida
men are
kuti
more
asiyanise
funny.
mabrain functions evarume
But then
nevakadzi
he,
kuti varume
continuing to quote,
vanosekesa
for
kupfuura
women,
vakadzi.
reproduction is, if not the only thing, certainly the main thing. Apart from giving them a very different attitude to filth and embarrassment, it also imbues them with a kind of seriousness and solemnity at which men can only goggle. Men have to pretend to themselves as well as to women that they are not the servants and supplicants. Women, cunning minxes that they are, have to affect not to be the potentates. Here he really doubles down on that position that women are the ones in control in society, and the patriarchy is a carefully orchestrated act that men and women play. Men pretend to be servants, men pretend to not be servants and supplicants. So he says men are the servants and supplicants of women. And it's all connected to the fact that women have power. He says they have power because of their ability to reproduce. It's all connected to their physical attraction, because apparently women are not physically attracted to men's bodies. But women have bodies that he, as a heterosexual man, finds attractive. So that gives women a power that he doesn't have. So men have to pretend, and then he can't just say women have to pretend. He has to slip in that they are cunning minxes. So again, women are kind of orchestrating this. They're still in control. Humor, if we are to be serious about it, arises from the ineluctable fact that we are all born into a losing struggle. Those who risk agony and death to bring children into this fiasco, women, simply can't afford to be too frivolous. And there just aren't that many jokes, even in the male repertoire, about childbirth and death.
Hakuna majokes akawanda
The death of a
ekuzvarwa
child.
kwevana
I'm
nekufa
certain that this is
kwevana.
also partly why in all cultures it is females who are the rank and file mainstay of religion. So he's going to agree with Sam
Obva ataura kuti
Harris in a
madzimai
way
ndivo
here.
akawandira nezvereligion uku.
Females are the rank and file mainstay of religion, which in turn is the official enemy of all humour.
Inova ndiyo
One
enemy
tiny
yekuseka
snuffle that
kwese.
turns into a wheeze, one little cut that goes septic, one pathetically small coffin, and the woman's universe is left in ashes and ruin. Try being funny about that, if you like. So it's a woman's connection to childbirth and children
Kubatanidzwa
that
kunoitwa
makes
madzimai
women
nekuzvara
incapable
nevana
of the
ndo
sense of
zvinoita
humour
kuti
that men are
vakadzi
capable of,
vasava
because
nekuseka.
apparently a
Ndo
man's
zvaanotaura.
universe is not so shattered at the death of his child.
Nekuti murume
Oscar Wilde was the only
haanyanyi
person ever to
kurwadziwa
make a
panofa
decent
mwana
joke about
wake.
the death of an infant, and that infant was fictional. And Wilde was, although twice a father, a queer. Remember, this is 2007. This is 1 year before Obama was
Igore
elected.
rimwe
This is
chete
not
Obama asati
1957 or
azvarwa. Haizi
1897. This is
1957 or 1897. In
Continuing to
2007.
quote, and because fear is the mother of superstition, and because women are partly ruled in any case by the moon and tides, so women are ruled by moon and tides,
Anoti vakadzi
women
vanotongwa
fall more heavily for dreams, for superstitions, for supposedly significant dates like birthdays and anniversaries, for romantic love, crystals, stones, lockets, relics, and other things that men know are fit mainly for mockery and limericks. Good grief, is there anything less funny than hearing a woman relate a dream she's just had? For men it is a tragedy that the two things they prize the most, women and humour, should be so antithetical. But without tragedy there could be no comedy. My beloved said to me when I told her I was going to have to address this melancholy topic that I should cheer up because, quote, women get funnier as they get older. Observation suggests to me that this might indeed be true, but excuse me, isn't that rather a long time to have to wait? That's the end of his article, that's how it ends. So it ends again with him being the victim. Poor Christopher Hitchens. Just sad that he has to wait for women to grow old before they finally develop a sense of humour. I've only quoted portions of it, and to be honest, it was hard to decide what to quote and what not, because the entirety of it is quotable. To illustrate the misogyny that ran through 21st century atheism. We've quoted a tiny bit of what you will find with Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, and all I need is one article by Christopher Hitchens. The leading voices that were governing philosophical atheism between 2001 and through to the election of Donald Trump. So when you read that Vox News article and they're addressing men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s who connect atheism to libertarianism, to men's rights groups, atheism has not led to gender equality, to anything progressive. Misogyny is deeply rooted within atheism. And an article to consider that something like this, even to make a comment about Oscar Wilde, calling him a queer and suggesting that somehow made him able to joke about the death of a child, Vanity Fair is not a far right or it's not a source I would go to find news. But it's not out of the mainstream that they would publish this in 2007. It does get... I don't think my laughing through reading it was emblematic of the sense of humour he wants women to have. So we are due to close. So we're going to review this just because I've just about finished what I want to say. So I hope, if you don't mind, I just say a couple more things to tie it up. We're looking at the Trinity, and I have and will come back to libertarianism. But why, with not America's past but its future, do you find atheism linked with the far right, linked with a political stream that we have for years said over and over and over and over again, this is Jerry Falwell, this is church and state, this is evangelicalism, and it is. But they are just one portion of a surface of a culture subculture that exists in a broader culture that is the right wing. They are kind of what is given if the world was to last a few generations, sinking into more the past and the future. I want to finish with a couple of quotes. This one is an article, How Men's Rights Activists Are Finding Unlikely Allies in New Atheism, Me Too, the Manosphere and the Church of Feminism. Because remember, they do link feminism with religion. They think both are completely irrational thoughts. I'll read. They're going to quote a far-right men's rights activist. He says, I discovered women's sole biological reason for existing is to reproduce and nurture the young. So women reproduce, nurture the young. The men is to reproduce, protect women, and contribute to the grand project known as civilization. So women contribute by having babies and raising them. It's men to protect and to contribute to the growth of civilization. Continuing to quote, the claim that women's capacity for reason matches man's is humorous. So they're built on reason, and their fundamental argument is that because of how evolution developed, two genders side by side, one gender is not programmed to think with the rationality that the other has through evolution developed. The affinity between New Atheism and the Manosphere, men's rights groups, values is clearest in the popularity of the phrase the Church of Feminism. Women are coming forward about the prevalence of sexual assault. They reply that the Church of Feminism is whipping up moral panic. And that is one thing that Sam Harris tweeted. He shared an article coming that was also shared on one of these Reddit. You explained to us, Rachel, those Reddit men's rights communities. Sam Harris tweeted the same article that had been shared there, also saying, as they were saying on this forum, that this is creating the Me Too movement is creating a moral panic. Feminists decry the prevalence of patriarchy. Richard Dawkins retweets a video comparing feminists to Islamists. The flip side of New Atheism and the Manosphere's valorization of rationality is that they necessarily identify their detractors as irrational. So if you believe in God, you're irrational. If you believe in feminism, you're irrational. For the Manosphere, the enemy is the hopelessly irrational woman. For New Atheism, the enemy is irrationality itself. But as the two groups, men's rights and New Atheism, as the two groups' members and rhetoric coalesce, New Atheism increasingly ends up firing at the same targets as blatant misogynists. They end up saying the same thing. As Me Too continues to promote conversations about gender dynamics and rights, New Atheists might find that it's time to be clear about their ideological commitments, or else having those commitments decided for them by their base. I have a couple of other points I wanted to read and make about how evolution develops this thinking, but I just want to close on that one sentence. The point that this author is making is that if these, particularly these leaders and the more current ones, the leaders of New Atheism is just 21st century atheism today. If the leaders of atheism today, if they don't get clear about what their ideological commitments are, essentially where they stand on the culture war, on gender rights, on LGBTQ rights, on civil rights, on freedom versus equality, if they don't make clear where they stand, it's not them, it's not these leaders who will decide where atheism sits. It's their base, and that is what is happening. That's the Vox article. That is all of the men who've been heavily influenced in their thinking by modern atheism, by how modern atheism promotes and shares misogyny, labeled as rational thinking. It's that base that is deciding
iri
that
kudecide
they also belong in the far right
kuti
community.
vanobhelongawo
Part
kufar right
of that Trinity.
community
So we'll
mutrinity.
close for time,
Nekuda kwenguva
but
yedu
we'll come
tichavhara,
back and review if you have
asi tichadzokera
thoughts or comments
tozorevhiewa kana muine
or
pfungwa
questions.
kana mubvunzo.
We will just touch on this next week and
Tichabata
finish up
pane
a
izvi
couple of
next
thoughts,
week,
and then we're
topedza
going to
pfungwa
go back to
shoma-shoma,
libertarianism,
todzokera
the
kune
other point of that
libertarianism,
Trinity
imwe
doctrine.
point yetrinity iyi.
Who would like to pray to close?
Ndiani angada kutivharira
Would someone
mukunamata?
be willing to pray to close?
Pane anoda
Josephine,
kunamata kuti avhare here? Josephine,
would you pray for us?
ngatinamatirawo. Josephine?
I didn't unmute. Yes.
Ndatisina kuunmute.
If you don't mind.
I will. Shall we pray?
Ngatinamatei.
Dear Lord in heaven,
Mwari kudenga,
we thank you so much for this Vespers meetings.
nemameeting ano.
We thank you for the fact that we have
Tichikutendai
learned so much.
nekuti tadzidza zvakawanda.
And it's like piercing into, likewise for the church members at large that will be viewing the videos.
Tunamatirawo mamembers vachange vachiona mavhideos aya vaappreciate message
find it enlightening,
nekuonawo ichijekesawo,
an increase of knowledge and understanding
ichiwedzera
for
ruzivo
all of us.
nekunzwisisa.
Bless those who participated tonight,
Komborerai vese
whether they're
vaparticipata
listening
nhasi,
or contributing.
vari
Bless the
kuteerera,
music. Lady,
neuye anga achiridza mumanzi,
Miss Bennett,
Miss Bennett.
thank you, Lord.
Tendai
And we look
Mwari.
forward to the Sabbath where we
Totarisirawo
can be
sabata
fed
apo tichapiwa chikafu.
to the brim. And may we overflow.
Dei taipfachukirawo.
This is our prayer in
Ndo
Jesus'
munamato
wonderful
wedu
name.
muzita raJesu.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.